A crucial task in any research project is defining its core research objectives or questions. What is the central goal or purpose of your research? What research topics, questions, or problems does your thesis or dissertation intend to address and why? Many dissertations and theses get into difficulty because not enough time and thought is devoted at the start to properly defining the project's research problem and its objectives or its questions that guide the study. As a result, precious time and resources can be wasted collecting irrelevant or unnecessary research data. This lesson looks at the process of defining research objectives, research questions, and hypotheses. It offers tips on how to ensure your research objectives and questions are well thought out and clearly expressed. And it also provides examples of well-written and not as well-written research purposes and research questions and objectives as a guide for those who might be struggling to get their purpose and objectives down on paper. By the end of this lesson, you will accomplish these learning objectives. In research context, the terms research aim or purpose statement, research objectives, research questions, and hypotheses tend to have specific meanings. Study these definitions so that you can apply them appropriately in your work. The term research aim or purpose statement refers to the main goal or overarching purpose of a research project. Sentences stating the aim of the project usually are quite brief and to the point. It might be 1 or 2 sentences in length. An example is, the purpose of this study was to measure the impact of Utah Farm Field Day events on participants' agricultural awareness regarding the food and fiber system. This study also evaluated the effectiveness of the Farm Field Day trip as a modality for increasing student awareness related to agriculture and how it impacts their daily lives. Because of their generality, research aims or purpose statements are almost always positioned at the very beginning of the research objectives or research questions that your study will address. They are broad and introductory rather than specific and focused. When writing your research aim or purpose statement, researchers will use key terms that identify the purpose or the aim of the research, linking back to the type of research being conducted. For many surveys that are exploratory or descriptive, you'll see purpose statements have words like explore, describe. For correlational or ex post facto research, you might see terms like predict or explain in the purpose statement. And for when you're doing experimental or quasi-experimental designs, you might see words like cause, significant difference between, or words like consequence. A research aim will usually be followed by a series of statements describing a project's research objectives. Research objectives indicate in more detail the specific research topics or issues the project plans to investigate, building on the main themes stated in your research aim and in your research problem statement. Normally, at least 3 research objectives will be stated, and it's good practice to put these in a numbered list so they can be clearly identified later in your thesis proposal and in your thesis or dissertation. When you're writing research objectives, make sure you specify the variables being investigated. Instead of saying demographic characteristics, be more specific by identifying those characteristics such as age, gender, income, and education. Be sure to indicate what data are being collected. If you're investigating relationships, your research objectives need to clearly indicate what variables are being related to other variables. And lastly, indicate the nature of those relationships being investigated. One good example of a purpose statement and research objectives is on this slide. The purpose of this study was to describe respondents' role in farm-to-school programming, FTS, and their interest in institutional marketing of local foods. Additionally, the researcher examined the attitudes and willingness of farmers to participate in FTS programming. Research objectives addressing the purpose of this study were as follows, and you'll see a bullet pointed list, numbered list of those research objectives, and each one starts with one of those key words: describe, identify, explain, test, and that will let you know the type of variables being done and the data analysis or statistics being ran to answer that research objective that's going to address the overall purpose of your study. Now, in some situations, rather than saying research objectives, researchers will prefer to use research questions. It's most often used in qualitative research methods like intensive interviews, focus groups, observation, or content analysis. An acceptable example of a purpose statement and research questions is as follows. The purpose of this mixed methods research study was to evaluate the effectiveness of the Farm Field Day event as a modality for increasing student knowledge and awareness about agriculture. The following are the results for each of the research questions. And you'll see that this student had 3 questions. And within the first question, the researcher actually had 3 sub-questions. This is a little unusual, but it's not uncommon in extension education or agricultural education to see something like this. Research hypotheses are predictions of a relationship between 2 or more variables. Data would then be gathered and analyzed statistically to see whether the results support the hypothesis or not. It's important to note that even if a research hypothesis is supported by the statistical analysis, it does not necessarily confirm that the independent variable causes the difference observed in the dependent variable. Establishing causation requires rigorous research design, such as an experimental design, and more than just one study. It's usually done longitudinally or with multiple studies over time to derive at that causation. In general, hypotheses are used only in quantitative research, not qualitative research, and normally only when previous research, literature review, or theory indicates a specific prediction is warranted. Some studies present hypotheses instead of research objectives, while others will present a combination of research objectives and then the hypotheses that are drawn for that research objective. There are criteria to follow in writing hypotheses as they are presented in this slide. To help you form your research objectives or questions, it might help you think about the type of research you're conducting and what would be most appropriate. So for surveys that are very descriptive, you'll see either research questions or research objectives. For a lot of relational, associational studies that are correlational, where you might explain the relationships between 2 or more variables, You could see research questions or objectives, but you might also test research hypotheses if you're doing an ex post facto research design. And for experimental studies, you're going to see most likely research hypotheses. So if your study's a survey, correlation, or qualitative, then consider using research objectives or research questions. If it's ex post facto or experimental, consider hypotheses. Now, in a research context, the terms research aim or purpose, research objectives, research questions, research hypotheses will have some common errors. And I want to walk you through what some of these common errors are and the solutions to overcome them. Occasionally, a mix of research objectives and research questions will be presented in a single list in a thesis or dissertation. This is quite confusing and difficult to follow. A better approach is to list only a series of research objectives or only a series of research questions. Don't mix the two. Another reasonably common error is confusing research objectives with project objectives. Research objectives refer to the area of knowledge that your thesis or dissertation is aiming to build on or advance. Project objectives are something quite different. They are practical steps involved in getting the day-to-day work done on your thesis or dissertation. Examples of project objectives include writing a survey, establishing validity of questionnaire, collecting data, analyzing the data, writing chapters 4 and 5, or communicating results to different audiences. Occasionally, researchers incorrectly include project objectives in with their research objectives. Combining research and project objectives in a single list is not appropriate, as the focus of the numbered list of research objectives is to address the research problem, not the processes associated with the management of the project or the dissemination of the findings. Project objectives should be listed separately in a timeline at the end of a thesis or dissertation proposal. I want to talk a little bit more about how you should link your research objectives to your research methods. Having a clear understanding of a project's research objectives or questions paves the way for other important decisions about the design and running of your thesis or dissertation project. This includes decisions about which populations or demographic groups to include in your study and what data collection methods to use. In some poorly designed studies, the research methods chosen for the study do not properly match the research objectives. As a result, the data obtained often does not directly address the research objectives. Think carefully about the relationship between your research objectives or questions and your choice of research methods. Aim to describe as clearly as possible how the sampling, data gathering, and analysis methods you intend to use will help meet each research objective or question you propose in your proposal. An example of how to link specific research questions or research objectives to data gathering methods is shown in this table. In this example, your project topic is an evaluation of the effectiveness of a training program, which is not uncommonly done in agricultural education or extension education or in family consumer science education. This table indicates the links between each of the project's 7 research questions and the different data sources and data gathering methods that will be used during the evaluation. Creating a table like this for yourself might really help you make sure that you're not missing anything or collecting anything that's unnecessary. I want to give you some tips for how to develop your research objectives or questions. The first thing I would do is go out and read several master's theses and dissertations in your area of interest. See how others are writing the problem statement and those research questions or research objectives. Then sit down and develop your own purpose or aim. And then the specific objectives you want to address to answer your research problem statement. Then change those research objectives to research questions so you can see the difference and how you would word the two. Then I want you to reach out and use some of the contacts you have in your discipline and your committee members, as well as the internet search of journal articles, theses, and dissertations to find examples of completed proposals on your topic. And note the style that's used to write your purpose and aim and research objectives. Then go back to your original draft and keep revising and editing it. And when you feel comfortable, share it with your committee's master professor who's supervising your thesis or dissertation, and start to get feedback so that you know that what you're doing is accurate and will help. The work put into developing clear and feasible objectives will pay off in subsequent stages of your thesis or dissertation project by providing you core organizing framework that assists with preparing literature reviews and research proposals, managing your project's data collection and analysis, and writing the research results. If you have questions or comments about the content presented in this lesson, contact me through Canvas inbox or kelsey.hall@usu.edu. Thanks.